The crack of a gunshot split the morning air as Virginia Zimmerman dove behind an overturned wagon, clutching a bundle of letters that proved her fiancé had been courting 3 other women across the territory. That scoundrel Preston Whitaker would never fool her again or any other woman if she had her way. Virginia had ridden all night to confront him at his ranch outside Silver Creek, only to find herself caught in the middle of what appeared to be a robbery gone wrong. "Stay down, miss," a deep voice commanded from somewhere to her right. Another shot rang out, followed by a man's pained cry from the direction of the ranch house. Virginia peeked over the wagon's edge to see a tall figure in a dusty black hat expertly firing at 2 men who were attempting to flee on horseback. His movements were quick, precise, nothing like the drunken gun waving she'd witnessed too often in town. One of the fleeing men slumped in his saddle before tumbling to the ground. The year was 1876, and Silver Creek, Colorado was supposed to have been Virginia's fresh start. 22 years old and determined to forge her own path, she'd come west to teach in the town's newly established school. Instead, she'd fallen prey to sweet words and false promises again. The shooting stopped. Virginia remained frozen behind the wagon, her heart pounding against her ribs. "They're gone now, miss. You can come out." The same deep voice, now closer. Virginia clutched her derringer, a gift from her father before she'd left Philadelphia. "How do I know you're not with them?" A low chuckle answered her. "If I was, wouldn't I have shot you already instead of those 2? She couldn't argue with that logic. Slowly, Virginia stood, keeping her small pistol pointed at the stranger. He raised an eyebrow at her weapon but kept his own holstered. Sunlight caught in his light brown hair, and Virginia noticed his eyes were a startling shade of blue, clear and direct. Dust covered his clothing, suggesting he'd been riding hard before arriving. "Patrick Forrester," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Ranch foreman for the Rocking M, about 10 miles east. I was tracking those cattle rustlers when I heard the commotion." He gestured toward the ranch house. "That your place?" Virginia lowered her gun slightly. "No, it belongs to Preston Whitaker." Something flickered in Patrick's eyes. "Whitaker? You're acquainted with him?" "Unfortunately." Virginia tucked the letters more securely into her pocket. "I came to return something to him." Patrick's gaze moved toward the house. "Well, whoever's inside might need help. Those men weren't leaving empty-handed." Together they approached the ranch house cautiously. Virginia's stomach turned when they found Preston sprawled across the threshold, blood seeping from a wound in his chest. Patrick knelt beside him, checking for signs of life. "He's breathing, but barely." He looked up at Virginia. "Can you ride? Town's about an hour from here, and he needs a doctor." Virginia hesitated. Part of her wanted to leave Preston to his fate, what better punishment for a liar? But she couldn't bring herself to condemn a man to death, no matter his sins. "I'll go," she said firmly. "My horse is around back." Patrick nodded. "I'll do what I can here. Ride fast, Mississippi." "Zimmerman. Virginia Zimmerman." His eyes widened slightly. "The schoolteacher?" "Yes." A slight smile touched his lips. "My sister Ellie speaks highly of you." Virginia tried to place the name among her students. "Eleanor Forrester? The little girl with the red ribbons in her hair. That's her." Pride warmed his voice. "She says you're the best teacher Silver Creek's ever had." Under different circumstances, Virginia might have blushed at the compliment. Instead, she hurried to retrieve her horse. Within minutes, she was galloping toward town, the letters still burning a hole in her pocket. The doctor returned with Virginia by mid-afternoon. They reached Silver Creek just as twilight descended. The small town was already settling into its evening routine, saloon doors swinging, shopkeepers closing up, a few families hurrying home for supper. Patrick escorted Virginia to the small house she rented near the schoolhouse. Thank you for your assistance today, she said formally, dismounting. It was unexpected. Patrick smiled slightly. Life out here usually is. He tipped his hat. Good night, Miss Zimmerman. Virginia, she corrected, surprising herself. His smile broadened. Good night, Virginia. She watched him ride away, telling herself the warmth in her cheeks was merely from the day's exertion. Word reached town the next morning that Preston Whitaker had died before dawn. Virginia received the news with a complex mix of emotions. She hadn't wished him dead, but there was an undeniable sense of justice in his passing. What she hadn't expected was for Patrick Forrester to appear at her door that afternoon. The sheriff asked me to deliver this, he said, handing her a small wooden box. Whitaker apparently had a will, named you as recipient of some personal effects. Virginia took the box reluctantly. I want nothing from him. Sheriff thought you might say that. Suggested you look inside before deciding. Patrick shifted his weight. I could wait if you'd like, in case you want to send it back. Curiosity won out. Virginia opened the box to find a small leather-bound journal and a folded letter addressed to her in Preston's handwriting. She hesitated, then broke the seal. He knew he was in danger, she said after scanning the first paragraph. These rustlers had threatened him before. This is just another lie, written when he realized his past might catch up with him. Patrick nodded. What will you do with the journal? Virginia flipped through it briefly. It contains names, dates, information about his dealings. Her teacher's conscience pricked at her. I should give it to the sheriff. The other women deserve to know the truth. Would you like me to take it to him? Virginia shook her head. No, thank you. This is my responsibility. She looked up at Patrick. Why are you being so helpful? You hardly know me. Something in his expression shifted. Sometimes you meet a person and just know they're worth helping. The simplicity of his answer caught Virginia off guard. Before she could respond, the school bell began to ring, not the usual measured toll, but a frantic clanging that signaled emergency. They rushed outside to see smoke billowing from the direction of the livery stable. The dry summer had made every wooden structure in town a potential tinderbox. Already, men were forming bucket brigades while women gathered children and valuables. I have to help, Patrick said, already moving toward the commotion. Virginia nodded. My students' records are in the schoolhouse. I need to make sure they're safe. They separated, each rushing toward different duties. For the next several hours, the entire town battled the blaze. Virginia joined other women hauling water, wrapping burns, and keeping panicked horses contained after they'd been freed from the burning stable. She caught glimpses of Patrick throughout the chaos, climbing onto a roof to dump water on spreading flames, carrying an elderly man from a threatened boarding house, organizing men into more efficient lines. He moved with purpose and authority, his actions speaking louder than any words could. By nightfall, they'd managed to contain the fire to the livery and 2 adjacent buildings. Exhausted, soot-covered townspeople gathered in the church, which had been turned into a temporary shelter. Virginia helped distribute food and blankets, checking on her students and their families. You're good with them, Patrick said, appearing beside her with a pot of coffee. The children, Virginia smiled tiredly. That's why I became a teacher. She accepted a cup gratefully. Virginia asked, surprised by her reluctance at the thought. Not right away, Patrick replied. I've offered to help rebuild the livery. Mr. Johnson lost everything in that fire. Virginia nodded. The livery owner was a kind man who'd often allowed children to pet his gentlest horses. I'll speak with the school board about postponing lessons so the older children can help as well. They fell into comfortable silence. Virginia found herself studying Patrick's profile in the moonlight. There was nothing particularly remarkable about his features: a straight nose, firm jaw shadowed with stubble, lines at the corners of his eyes suggesting he smiled often, yet she couldn't look away. "You're staring, Miss Zimmerman," he said softly, without turning. Heat rushed to Virginia's cheeks. "I was just thinking about why I haven't seen you in town before. Silver Creek isn't that large." Patrick turned to face her. "The Rockingham keeps me busy. When I do come to town, it's usually for supplies or to check on my family. My mother and the younger children live on the other side of town." "Not the side with the schoolhouse," Virginia guessed. He smiled. "No, though Ellie makes the walk every day, rain or shine. She's a dedicated student. Like her teacher, from what I hear." Virginia looked away, unused to such direct compliments. "I should check on the families inside." Patrick didn't stop her, but his voice followed her to the door. "I meant what I said earlier, Virginia. Not all men are liars." Over the next 2 weeks, Silver Creek slowly recovered from the fire. The community came together, rebuilding what was lost and helping those who had been displaced. Virginia found herself working alongside Patrick nearly every day, whether distributing supplies, teaching children in the makeshift outdoor classroom she'd established, or helping with the actual rebuilding. She learned he was as good with words as he was with his hands, often reading to the younger children while their parents worked. His patience seemed inexhaustible, whether explaining knot tying to a group of boys or listening to Mrs. "There's little to tell. My father abandoned us when I was young. My mother raised my brother and me alone until she remarried. My stepfather was unkind. I left Philadelphia as soon as I was old enough to secure a teaching position." Patrick was silent for a moment. "And your brother?" "Lost at Gettysburg." His hand touched hers briefly, a gesture of sympathy so light she might have imagined it. "I'm sorry." They reached her small house. The evening air had grown cooler, carrying the scent of pine from the surrounding hills. Virginia found herself reluctant to end their conversation. Virginia looked down at their joined hands. "I think I'd like that." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Then I'll see you tomorrow, Virginia Zimmerman." True to his word, Patrick began courting Virginia with a respectful patience that both surprised and delighted her. Unlike her previous suitors, he made no extravagant declarations or promises. Instead, he simply showed up bringing her wildflowers he'd found on his rides, escorting her to church socials, listening intently when she spoke of her teaching or her dreams. Was she very heartbroken? Surprisingly, no. She'd already grown suspicious when he kept delaying their wedding. "She's now engaged to a banker in Denver and sounds quite happy." Patrick smiled. "Things have a way of working out as they should." Virginia studied his profile. "Do you really believe that? That there's some divine plan guiding our lives?" He considered the question seriously, as he did all her questions. "I believe we're given choices, and those choices have consequences. But yes, I do think there's a purpose to it all, even when we can't see it." He glanced at her. "How else would I explain meeting you just when I did?" Heat rushed to Virginia's cheeks. "Some would call that coincidence." "Maybe." He returned to his whittling. "Seems like an awful lot of coincidences would have to line up, though. Those rustlers choosing that day, you deciding to confront Whitaker at that exact time, me tracking them to that spot." He shook his head. "My grandfather would have called it fate." Virginia had never been one for such romantic notions, but sitting beside Patrick in the gathering dusk, she could almost believe in destiny. The first snow of the season arrived in early November, transforming Silver Creek into a glistening wonderland. Virginia's students were delightfully distracted, pressing their faces to the schoolhouse windows to watch the flakes swirl and dance. "Perhaps we should embrace the weather rather than fight it," Virginia announced, closing her lesson book. Everyone get your coats. We're going to conduct a scientific study of snowflakes. The children cheered, rushing to don mittens and scarves. Outside, Virginia showed them how to catch flakes on black cloth to observe their intricate patterns. Patrick waited patiently, his steady presence giving her strength. He was engaged to my friend, she continued finally, but he made advances toward me. When I rejected him, he became threatening. He had influence in the city, connections. He made it impossible for me to find work there. Said he'd ruin my reputation if I stayed. Understanding dawned in Patrick's eyes, followed by a flash of anger quickly suppressed. So you came west? Virginia nodded. I thought a fresh start would help me forget. But then Preston happened, and it seemed to confirm what I already believed, that men couldn't be trusted. Patrick took her gloved hands in his. Virginia, you don't need to explain your past to me, but I'm grateful you trust me enough to share it. His blue eyes held hers with unwavering sincerity. Nothing you've told me changes how I feel about you. The simple declaration brought tears to Virginia's eyes. Before she could respond, a snowball whizzed past them, followed by a chorus of giggles. Patrick grinned. I believe your scientific study has evolved. Virginia turned to see her students engaged in an enthusiastic snowball fight. So it has. Perhaps you'd care to join us, Mr. Forrester? For educational purposes, of course. His laugh echoed across the schoolyard. How could I refuse such a scholarly invitation? By the time they called an end to the impromptu battle, both Virginia and Patrick were covered in snow, cheeks flushed with cold and laughter. The children returned to the schoolhouse chattering excitedly about their adventure. They adore you, Patrick observed as they watched the last student disappear inside. Not just as their teacher, but as someone who brings joy to learning. Virginia brushed snow from her skirt, pleased by the compliment. Children respond to honesty. They know when an adult truly cares. As do I, Patrick said softly. He reached out, brushing a snowflake from her eyelash with gentle fingers. Virginia, there's something I've been wanting to ask you. Her heart began to pound. Yes. He seemed about to speak when the school bell rang, signaling the end of the lunch hour. Patrick stepped back with visible reluctance. It can wait until Thanksgiving, he said. Some questions deserve the right moment. Thanksgiving at the Forrester home was a joyous affair. Patrick's mother, a warm woman with the same striking blue eyes as her son, welcomed Virginia as though she were already family. Patrick's younger brothers William, age 14, and Daniel, just 9, peppered her with questions about teaching and life back east. Eleanor proudly showed Virginia around the modest but comfortable home, pointing out her father's photographs and Patrick's woodworking projects. He made this table, Eleanor whispered when they were alone in the sitting room. And that rocking chair for Mother. Patrick can make almost anything. Virginia ran her hand over the smooth oak surface of the table, admiring the craftsmanship. He's very talented. Eleanor's expression turned serious. He likes you very much. He's never brought anyone to Thanksgiving before. Before Virginia could respond, Patrick himself appeared in the doorway, looking slightly nervous. Mother's about to serve dinner. Ellie, would you help her bring out the dishes? Eleanor departed with a knowing smile, leaving Virginia and Patrick alone. He crossed to stand beside her, his fingers lightly touching the table's edge. My first major project, he said. Took me 3 tries to get the joints right. It's beautiful, Virginia replied honestly. Your family is lovely, Patrick. Thank you for including me today. He turned to face her. There's something I wanted to show you before dinner. If you don't mind a brief walk. Curious, Virginia followed him outside. The day was clear and cold, the recent snow sparkling in the afternoon sunlight. Patrick led her around the house to a small workshop set apart from the main building. "My father built this," he explained, opening the door. "It's where I do most of my woodworking now." Inside, the shop was organized with tools hanging neatly on the walls and several projects in various stages of completion. But what immediately caught Virginia's attention was a beautiful roll-top desk positioned near the window. "This is exquisite," she said, approaching it. The wood was a rich cherry, polished to a warm glow. Intricate carvings of mountain wildflowers, including her beloved bluebells, adorned the sides. "I made it for you," Patrick said quietly. Virginia turned to him in surprise. "For me?" He nodded, a hint of color touching his cheeks. "I thought you could use it for planning your lessons or working on your wildflower guide." He opened one of the small drawers to reveal compartments sized perfectly for pencils and pens. "There's space for all your teaching materials." Emotion swelled in Virginia's chest as she realized how much thought, time, and skill had gone into this gift. No man had ever given her something so personal, so perfectly aligned with her needs and interests. "Patrick, I don't know what to say. This must have taken months." "Since July," he admitted. "I worked on it whenever I could. There's actually one more thing." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box, similar in style to the desk. "I was going to wait until after dinner, but—" He opened the box to reveal a ring, a simple gold band set with a small but brilliant sapphire. "Virginia Zimmerman," Patrick said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "I know you came west to escape men's lies, and I know you've been hurt by those who should have protected your heart. I can't change your past, but I can promise you honesty in your future." He took her hand gently. "I love you. I think I've loved you since that first day when you stood behind that wagon with your little derringer, refusing to be afraid. Will you marry me?" Virginia looked from the ring to Patrick's face, seeing nothing but sincerity in his blue-eyes that had never lied to her, never looked away when speaking difficult truths. For months, he had shown her through actions rather than words what kind of man he was: honorable, steady, kind. "When I first met you," she said softly, "you told me not all men were liars, and you asked to be my exception." She placed her hand against his cheek. "You've proven yourself exceptional in every way, Patrick Forrester. Yes, I will marry you." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he was drawing her into his arms, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that felt like coming home, like the end of a long journey and the beginning of an even greater adventure. "The sapphire reminded me of your eyes," he murmured when they finally parted. "I had it sent from Denver." Virginia looked down at the ring sparkling on her finger, then back at the man who had taught her to trust again. "It's perfect. Everything is perfect." A light snow began to fall outside the workshop window as they returned to the house, hand in hand. Virginia thought about the path that had brought her here, from heartbreak in Philadelphia to deception in Silver Creek, and finally to this moment of pure joy. Perhaps Patrick was right about fate after all. Virginia and Patrick were married the following spring in Silver Creek's small church, surrounded by students, friends, and family. As they exchanged vows beneath arches decorated with mountain wildflowers, Virginia thought of how far she had come from the wary, wounded woman who had arrived in Colorado 2 years earlier. "I promise to be your shelter and your freedom," Patrick vowed, his voice clear and certain. "To speak truth to you always, to listen when you speak, and to love you through all seasons of our life together. I promise to trust in your word and your heart," Virginia responded, her eyes never leaving his. "To build our future with open eyes and an open heart, to share your joys and sorrows, and to love you without reservation or fear." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the entire congregation erupted in cheers. Virginia's students tossed wildflower petals as the newlyweds walked down the aisle. Patrick's mother wept happy tears, and Eleanor beamed with pride at officially gaining a sister. Later that evening, as they stood on the porch of the small cabin Patrick had built on Rockingham land, their new home, Virginia looked out at the vast Colorado sky, ablaze with stars. "Having second thoughts, Mrs. Forrester?" Patrick asked, his arms encircling her waist. Virginia leaned back against his chest, savoring the sound of her new name. "Not one. I was just thinking about how differently things might have turned out if I hadn't confronted Preston that day." Patrick pressed a kiss to her temple. "Then I'm grateful for his dishonesty. It brought you to me." Virginia turned in his arms. "I used to think all men were liars. Now I know better." She reached up to touch his face. "Some men are exceptions. Some men change everything." As Patrick lowered his lips to hers, Virginia knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just an exception, but a truth worth believing in, a love that would endure through all the challenges and joys that lay ahead in their shared future.